Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Please check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. Thank you. And also, I have recently started a tarot channel, and I will be posting there from time to time, hopefully at least once a week from now on. And if you're interested in tarot, please go ahead and check out that channel and maybe subscribe. And also, if you would be interested in getting a private reading from me in tarot, you can also email me at the email in the video description, and I'm gonna send you more reviews that I have gotten from clients so far, as well as sample readings and a pricing list. Okay, so thank you. That being said, today's video is going to be basically a re-recording of, what I posted about a day ago, because I realized after I posted it that the sound was very faint, really annoyingly faint. I'm struggling with my recording app right now, so hopefully this is going to be better. Okay. And, it's probably for the best, because I realized after I did the video that I forgot to mention one or two pretty important topics. Okay. So as an introduction, once again, this is going to be on the topic of aspects. And the reason I wanted to make a video about aspects and yogas is also to answer some frequently asked questions that I have gotten over the entire time that I've had the channel. I've had a lot of people comment asking, how do you define a conjunction? What exactly is a conjunction? Do you take it out of sign? Do you only take it if two planets are in the same sign? What about orbs? Blah, blah, blah. So all of this stuff. Also questions about yogas, to which extent are they relevant, or why don't I take more yogas into account? Stuff like that. And also, I want to talk about some things that I have noticed through empirical observation with respect to the connection between aspects, especially in the natal chart of a person, and things that show up in a person's psychological makeup. Okay, so this has been the introduction. So first of all, let me start with my opinions about aspects and what aspects do I take into account when it comes to chart analysis. So first of all, I want to remind people also, as I mentioned in previous videos, that I come from a tropical astrology background. And if you come from a tropical astrology background, you probably know that the general aspects are conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, and then there are countless minor aspects like the quintile, the quincunx, the semi-sextile, biquintile, etc., etc. So basically, these aspects are mainly based on the relationship on the circle of the zodiac, on the zodiac wheel, which is a circle, and it's based on degrees, okay? Degrees of arc and minutes of arc and differences between the signs, okay? So for instance, a square is a 90-degree angle, okay? That's why the square happens between planets that are in the same modality and different elements. So for instance, Virgo and Gemini. Virgo is mutable earth, Gemini is mutable air, okay? And basically, according to Vedic astrology, this is not how aspects work. According to traditional Vedic astrology, they have their own, this is something that I didn't mention in the video that I posted previously, they have their own aspects, okay? So there are, basically the general theory is that every planet can cast the conjunction or the opposition, but then there are also a few planets, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, Ketu, which are technically not planets, but they are points, which cast so-called special aspects. So, for instance, Saturn aspects the 3rd house from itself, aspects the 10th house from itself, in addition to also aspecting by conjunction and opposition, meaning the 7th house from itself, which is the opposition. Now, there are these aspects, okay? And also in Vedic astrology, the orbs do not matter as much as they matter in tropical astrology, okay? Meaning that in tropical astrology, orbs difference basically decide whether there is an actual aspect between two planets or 2 points, or if there isn't. So, for instance, if you have Sun in 0 degrees Aries and Moon in 9 degrees 30 minutes Aries, that stands as a conjunction. But according to a lot of astrologers, most tropical astrologers, if the degree difference is more than 10, so if you would have Sun in 0 degrees Aries but Moon in 10 degrees 30 minutes Aries, that would no longer count as a conjunction according to the tropical standards. And it's the same with every single aspect. So the trine, and usually for the smaller aspects, the square, the trine, the sextile, the orb is even tighter. The general theory being that the more minor the aspect is, the closer, the tighter the orb difference has to be in order for that aspect to actually have an effect. That's the general theory. Well, that's not how it goes in Vedic astrology. And now my view is basically, again, I go by what works, what I have found to work based on empirical observation. So basically, even though I stick to the general Vedic guidelines in the sense that I take 2 planets to be conjunct if they are in the same sign, I don't look to the orbs that much. I also take into account the other aspects, and I take into account the orbs even in conjunctions in order to determine how intense the conjunction is. So that's the general theory that stands for both tropical and Vedic astrology, that the tighter the conjunction or the tighter the orb difference, so it's like if it's under, let's say, 1 degree of orb, if you have like Sun in 0 degrees 30 minutes Aries and Moon in 0 degrees 45 minutes Aries, that is a very tight conjunction. That's a much tighter conjunction than if Sun were in 0 degrees Aries and Moon were in 25 degrees Aries, okay? In which case, it would be like almost an entire sign of difference. But, okay, even if by being in the same sign they are conjunct, the tighter the conjunction, the more intense it will be felt. It will be, if it's a natal chart, of course, the more intensely it will affect the person in question, the more it will, determine his or her personality. And if it's in synastry, the more intensely it will be felt in between these two people, and it will be a driving force for the relationship, okay? And aside from that, what I wanted to say, yes, so even though I stick to the general guidelines of Vedic astrology, I stick to the special aspects, I take those into account, I also look at the tropical aspects because I have found them to be relevant in analyzing charts, whether it's natal chart, whether it is, especially I would say the synastry, but even in the natal chart, okay? So meaning the square, the trine, the sextile. However, the way that I look at them is more from a Vedic perspective in the sense that I actually do not look at the orb. And the reason why is because basically it's about the energy, okay? Yes, the orb is going to determine how intensely felt this energy is going to be, but basically what these aspects mean, the square, for instance, the square, it's a clash between the different energies of the signs, okay? So if you remember, the signs are divided into mutable, cardinal, and fixed based on modality or modes of expression, and they're divided into 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And each of these aspects shows a relationship between these combinations, okay? And the combination of element and modality gives a sign, right? So Aries is a combination of fire and the cardinal element, and it is unique to Aries, okay? You don't have another sign in the zodiac that is fire and cardinal. Taurus is fixed and earth, right? Gemini is mutable and air, and so on. Cancer, again, is cardinal and water, okay? And the square is between signs that are the same modality and different elements, okay? minus the sign of opposition. No, sorry, forget about the opposition. So yes, the square is between different elements. So for instance, for Aries, Cancer is square because they are the same modality and they are different elements, water and fire. Okay. Yes, minus the sign of opposition, like I mentioned. The sign that is opposite Aries is cardinal air. Okay. So this is a complementary element for Aries. Okay. Normally fire and air form a sextile minus the opposition. Okay. And then, yeah, so on and so forth, right? So Capricorn is also a square because it's earth and cardinal energy for Aries. I mean, it's a square for Aries, okay? And when you're talking about a square in aspect, you're talking about the clash between these two separate elements. So even though maybe they are 20 degrees apart, in my opinion, this still stands as a square, and it still stands as a, like, whatever, the same thing for sextile, trine, and all the other aspects. I even look at the quincunx to some extent. And yeah, because you're looking at the clash between these energies. That's what you're looking for. You're not, I mean, again, yes, the orb difference is going to show how intensely felt this is going to be, how strong it's going to be. Aside from this, I always look at the full picture. So I always look at nakshatras, okay? Because even within the same sign, there are different nakshatras. So you could have a conjunction between two planets, but they are in different nakshatras, in which case you're going to have a slightly different interpretation than if they were in the same nakshatra. By the same token, you could have two planets that are out of sign, but they are in the same nakshatra, in which case, again, it will be, you know, it will affect the interaction. It will be kind of like a lot of similarities between these two planets, even though I would not technically look at it as a conjunction. For instance, you can have Sun in the last degrees of Aries, like 29 degrees Aries, and Moon in 3 degrees Taurus. Both of those are in Kritika. So they're going to have a similar energy and maybe be able to relate to each other in a close way. But they're not technically conjunct. According to some Vedic astrologers that I have come across, they do take a conjunction out of sign as long as the orb difference between the two planets or points is less than 3 degrees. So for instance, again, if you have Sun in 29 degrees Kritika and you have Moon in 1 or 2 degrees, 2 degrees max of Taurus, it stands as a conjunction, even though they are not in the same sign. That's something, but again, this is something that I've come across in some Vedic astrologers accepting this. But the vast majority of the Vedic astrology school, as far as I have seen, does not take conjunctions out of sign. So they have to be in the same sign to be conjunct. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to say. Also, I want to mention the Gemini aspects. Now, of course, again, this is my opinion. I personally have not found Gemini aspects to be particularly insightful. I know that a lot of Vedic astrologers do use them, especially when it comes to transits and stuff. But I personally think that, you know, as far as I've seen, at least, they don't offer any valuable extra insights. You can certainly Google them. There are tables online to how to check Gemini aspects, so maybe you can test this yourself and, you know, let me know if you feel like this is accurate. Basically, the Gemini aspects are based on signs, okay? So each sign has certain signs that it aspects, and it's not based on the same rules as the aspects from tropical astrology with respect to angles and orbs and all this stuff, okay? So they're kind of like not particularly intuitive. But, like I said, some Vedic astrologers really use them a lot, and they really swear by them, so who knows, I don't know. Again, the reason I say I don't really follow them is because I feel like they overcomplicate things. Like, I feel like there's already so many variables to take into account when it comes to analyzing a chart, or synastry, or transits, or whatever, that, I mean, it's like you don't exhaust all the possibilities by even looking at the general aspects and the general theories without getting into like all kinds of different aspects and whatever. like Gemini aspects and yogas. I'm going to get into yogas a little bit later. Okay. That's something that I wanted to mention. Okay, so this is the general things that I wanted to say about aspects. So basically, yes, I take into account basically a mix between tropical and Vedic astrology when it comes to how I see aspects. But I always look at the full picture because that's the most important thing. You have to take into account every nuance of a chart in order to get an accurate interpretation. And something that I wanted to mention is with respect to the psychological aspect. Something that I have noticed, and I think I have also read this at some point, is that what I have noticed, especially with respect to conjunctions, but I'm pretty sure that it also happens with other aspects, not just the conjunction. And namely, what I have seen happen is that the tighter the aspect is, the more unconscious the person in question is going to be with respect to that particular aspect of their personality. So, for example, if a person has, let's say, Mercury conjunct Saturn, and it's a really tight conjunction, like under 1 degree of orb, the person in question may not realize that they are a very pragmatic, maybe sometimes overly pessimistic kind of person, but the people around this person is going to immediately recognize that they're being pessimistic. Like, other people are going to notice and they're going to be like, oh, why are you always seeing the glass half empty? And this person is going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't see the glass half empty. I'm just realistic. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, it tends to show some kind of an aspect of a person's personality that is really unconscious to them. It's like a blind spot in their personality. And of course, depending on the aspect, this could show, varying degrees of behaviors. It could show, like, for instance, a person who has Moon conjunct Mars can come across as a very angry person sometimes, depending on what else the conjunction is doing, like which sign it's in, etc. But the person in question may not see this. Like, they may be completely unaware of how they come across to other people, or they might be completely unaware that they're actually angry and intense, but other people are going to see it. That's something that I have noticed. Now, I have especially seen this happen with conjunctions, but I think even with other aspects, it also plays out to some extent. It's just that other aspects are less intense. The conjunction is the strongest aspect, right? Yeah. And also in synastry, in chart inter-aspects, this can, by the same token, be some aspect, some interaction that is happening between these two people on a very subconscious level, where they may not be aware of how they influence each other or how they trigger each other, but it still is a very prominent influence in their interaction, in their relationship. So this is something that I wanted to say about aspects. And another thing that I wanted to say with respect to psychology, quote unquote, is also what I have noticed is that, and again, I think also I came across this at some point in history, that within a conjunction, the planet that has the lower degree is the planet that has the upper hand in that conjunction. So again, for example, with the Moon-Mars conjunction, if a person has Moon at a lower degree than Mars, so let's say you have Moon in 2 degrees Aries and Mars is in 10 degrees Aries, this basically means that Moon has the upper hand. And what is Moon? Moon is the mind, Moon is empathy, Moon is emotion, Moon is nurturing, but it's the mind, basically, okay? So, of course, it always depends on what signs and what nakshatras and what other aspects, the full circumstances surrounding this conjunction, all of those things have to be looked at. But in general, the way that this can be interpreted is that the person's Moon is stronger, is taking precedence over the Mars, which Mars is like impulsivity, it's aggressiveness, it's anger, it's, being a go-getter, also could potentially being ruthless because Mars is the warrior general archetype, so it's about winning at all costs, so it can definitely be ruthless. So if the moon is at a lower degree, this person is actually going to think before they act, okay? So even though they will still have that passion that comes with the Moon-Mars conjunction, they will be more ethical, they will be more merciful, they will try to be more understanding than a person who has the opposite situation where Mars would be at a lower degree than the moon. The Mars being at a lower degree than the moon in a conjunction would show a person that throws themselves headfirst into something, because Mars is impulsivity, it's desirous nature, it's basically hunting for what you want, etc. And also, like I mentioned, there's some degree of ruthlessness and selfishness connected to it. It's about being competitive. So it's basically a side of you that is not merciful, not understanding, just wants to win, is basically selfish and kind of blunt. So a person who has Mars at a lower degree will maybe throw themselves headfirst, will be impulsive, will be maybe aggressive, maybe will hurt other people's feelings, and only later think about what they've done, you know, once they have already committed whatever, like all kinds of negative actions. They will actually, the moon part is going to start to sink in, and they're going to be like, what have I done? You know, that kind of thing. Just to give you an example, of course, this could take on different interpretations depending on what planets are to be looked at. But generally, the planet that has the lowest degree tends to have the first say in the conjunction, okay? Generally. That's something that I also wanted to mention. What else did I want to mention? Yes, and this is the part where I wanted to talk about yogas. And like, yeah, a lot of people have asked me about yogas and stuff, and I actually thought about this for a while. I have gotten a report, like one of those automated general reports from an Indian site like some years ago, and I have, according to that chart, probably about 10 to 15, I haven't exactly counted, but 10 to 15 wealth yogas, okay? And spoiler alert, I am not wealthy. And that really got me thinking about, well, not just that, there have been multiple instances where I looked over these yoga theories, you know, and a lot of them just didn't really play out the way that they were supposed to play out. First of all, let me define what exactly do I mean by yoga, okay? Yoga basically refers to these combinations of different aspects, usually in a natal chart. So for instance, if you have like the second house lord with the ninth house lord conjunct, it's a kind of a wealth yoga. Moon conjunct Jupiter is also kind of a wealth yoga. Then there are all kinds of yogas. There are marriage yogas, there are no marriage yogas, there are, you know, education yogas that show you are meant to be a scholar or a person who's very successful in intellectual endeavors. There's artistic yogas, etc., etc., okay? They may not be called exactly like this, but this is what they show, you know? So they will show good luck or good ability in a certain field in life. But the problem is that, again, here's the part where I'm going to ruffle some feathers, is that a lot of these yogas, in my humble opinion, don't really mean anything. First of all, if you don't look at the full chart. So it's like, for instance, in my chart, there are very simple individual placements that I have in both my natal and my divisional chart that actually explain my trajectory financially and professionally to a much greater extent than any of the wealth yogas, quote unquote, that I have according to some automated reports. And in order to see them, you know, you have to look at the full picture, basically, and you have to pay attention. And this is the part where I'm going to ruffle some feathers, that I really feel like these yogas started out as a way for astrologers to basically impress people and try to turn astrology into some kind of an exact science, basically. Try to make it sound like, you know, basically they can create some kind of a perfect mathematical algorithm by which they can say, if you have the 9th house lord conjunct the 12th house lord divided by the number of houses between them multiplied by I don't know how many planets in mutable signs you have, that you will always get I just made that up. It doesn't mean anything. Like, that you will always get the same result. Okay? That's the general idea. That's why I say I feel like they're trying to turn it into some kind of a mathematical algorithm, which, in my opinion, really does not make any sense, because in every individual chart, there are a multitude of aspects to be taken into account. There are countless aspects to be taken into account. And, you know, and I would say to them, you know, I would say to these people who follow yogas, is like, what is the, to a large extent, I would say, like, what is the point of having this list of, like, oh, I need to check this formula and this formula and this formula, if you sometimes miss important details, like, you know, sometimes you don't see the woods for the trees because you're so caught up in details, or you're caught up in trying to juggle all these different mathematical formulas. Because at the end of the day, astrology is about intuition, the way that I see it. And another thing that I wanted to say with this, in this regard, is that I have myself gotten some, you know, consultations from astrologers that are really popular, that have YouTube channels, etc. And, you know, later I found out that they missed really important details in my chart, and a lot of the interpretations that they gave were also, like, super complex and super based on, you know, they would get all in detail in my divisional charts, and, you know, look at all these different things and tips and tricks of how to, I don't know, juggle aspects between planets and conjunctions and all this stuff, house lord, and how they are placed with respect to one another. And meanwhile, they missed pretty, like, simple and very direct indications in my chart that would have explained a lot of things if these people wouldn't have been caught up in details the way that I saw it, at least. And I realized this once I started learning more and I started to understand my own chart more, because at the time when I got the consultation, obviously I was still a newbie in Vedic astrology. So yeah, this is something that I wanted to say, but I feel like they're trying to turn it into, like, a mathematical thing, or they're just trying to impress, you know, like, potential clients, because it's somehow, by turning, you know, talking about formulas and stuff, it makes astrology seem more scientific or something, or more respectable and more logical. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's still mainly a game of intuition, because there's just so many factors to take into account in every individual chart, that it's just, you know, unless maybe at some point we're going to create some kind of AI that is going to use big data technology or something to completely accurately give predictions based on an individual chart, I don't see how anyone is going to come up with relevant mathematical formulas that can, you know, algorithms, like I said, they're always going to bring you to the same place in any chart, because there are just so many factors, so many variables, so many constants to be taken into account. That's the way that I've seen it so far, at least. I don't know. Maybe at some point I'm going to change my mind. That being said, I do take into account yogas sometimes, but always within the context of the chart. I'm not going to immediately, like, get hung up on a yoga, like, oh, this person has, you know, this yoga, so it must be like this. And another thing that I also want to mention is that when I would have conversations with people who were very traditional Vedic astrologers, and I would say, well, I have these yogas that show this, and this never materialized in my life. They would say things like, well, maybe you just haven't gone through the right dasha yet, or maybe the planets in question have some kind of an affliction that you don't see, or that, you know, there's a low Ashtanga Varga score, which Ashtanga Varga scores are also something mathematical, which I have found relevant, Ashtanga Varga scores, to a large extent. But I won't get into that now. That's different from yogas, okay? Basically, it's something where you calculate how strong a planet is. It's also some kind of math based on mathematical calculations. But then I would say, you know, if it's, you still have to take all of these things into account, then what is the point, really, of having a list of yogas to go through every time and be like, oh, does this person have this yoga? Do they have this yoga? Do they have this yoga? Yeah, because... And of course, let's not forget that ultimately everyone has free will. So even if you have, like, you could have, for instance, tons of marriage yogas, but if you are dead set on, great, thank you, ambulance. Heaven forbid, I should be knocking on wood, but I'm afraid that if I knock on this IKEA desk, I'm gonna burst into flames or something. Because it's not wood. I don't know what it's made of. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, basically, you know, the stuff about yoga. So it's like, it's always a question of looking at the full picture. That's the way that I see it. And I wanted to make this video because I've had multiple questions. You know, I've had multiple questions about aspects. So I really hope that this video has answered a lot of those questions about how I see aspects, the differences, some of the differences between tropical and sidereal. And yes, I have had the recent request to talk about the differences between charts in sidereal and charts in tropical. I am going to talk about that in a future video because it's like a pretty lengthy topic and I need to think about how to organize that, like maybe look at examples. But yeah, it's going to be a separate topic because otherwise it's going to drag on for way too long. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say, okay, and I hope you will find this useful, and if you have, once again, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video, and also if you're interested in a personal consultation in astrology or tarot, email me at the email in the video description. Okay, thank you.